this morning?
I had a speaker.
Okay.
I had two things that I wanted.
Welcome back to the channel, guys. Donnie D here. So today I'm just going to be doing some prep work on this shower. I've had some other videos doing similar jobs. This shower is actually a 5-foot by 3-foot shower. I'm using blanky permat to set on the plywood subfloor here. That way I can bond my mud right to that. I'm just going to be completely straight with you. This is definitely not an approved method. The only one who approves this would be Latticrete, and they approve if you use the Latticrete Stratomat uncoupling membrane to set to the plywood, and then you bond your mud to the membrane there. I like using the permat, especially over plywood, and the reason for that is it strengthens up the subfloor. This blanky permat is actually made for stone, so if you have one layer of 3/4 tongue and groove plywood or 69 center joist, you could put this blanky permat, thin set it down with a 1/4 inch trowel, and you're ready for a stone. That brings your deflection up on the floor, and your deflection essentially is basically how strong the floor is and how much it moves between the joists when you step on them. So this is a process that I like to do when I mud my showers. I used to do a lot of foam trays, and those still work, but from my experience, especially on the remodels like this one, the floors are really level. I mean, really. If it's off more than about 3/16, you're always better off mudding it. Now, the other thing you could do is pour a self-leveler, but at that point, it's going to take you about half the day between prepping it, pouring it, letting it dry, and then setting your tray. And then, it still might not be perfect. You got to pour pins in there, you got to do dams, so it could be even a day just to get that prep. And then you come in and put the tray. I like to do the mud lately, and the main reason is for that is, you can make the mud into any shape you want. So I can get my perimeter dead level and then a nice pitch to the drain. Now, what's nice about doing the mud too, what's real popular these days is, those river rock pebble shower floors, and essentially what it looks like is rocks on your floor. So they're real popular, and the only issue is with those, well, there's a few issues. They take a lot of grout, and not only that, since they're rocks, they're all not the same size or thickness, so the water will take a little bit longer to drain if you do your standard 1/4 inch per foot. So anytime I get the pebbles, I like to aim for about 3/8 per foot pitch to help the water drain. So that just helps out. So I'm just going to be doing pretty much a time lapse on the rest of the videos. I might do a voiceover of each step, explaining what I'm doing, and go from there. Once again, I'm using blanky permat to set on the plywood, and I do have actually 2 layers of plywood on this job, so it's more than strong. I'm using a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch square gauge trowel. I'm using a modified thin set to set it, and then I'm going to spread out my mud again, my thin set, and bond the mortar bed right to that. Okay, so now I got the permat down, I'm ready to put my drain in. And one thing I've learned, especially with helping out the plumbers, now I am not a plumber by any means, but one thing that you definitely want to do is you want to prime both sides of the section you do. And you want to glue not just one side with the pipe or the socket there, you want to glue both sides thoroughly. And when you put the pipe in like I'm doing now, you want to give it about a 1/4 or so turn to spread out the glue, making sure you got a good seal there. It's really important. I see a lot of guys just gluing one side and just pushing the tray and not turning. It's important if you could turn it, if you got the room, the space, you definitely want to turn about a 1/4 turn and go from there. Another quick tip is that when you put the primer on, you want to make sure that you apply that glue when the primer is still somewhat wet. This Just a quick tip there for you guys. Okay, something else I could definitely mention here. I see a lot of guys, they glue it, they push it in, and that's it, they let go. So it even says right on these cans I'm using here of the glue and the primer that when you do put the pipes together, you want to hold them together for about 30 seconds, because what happens is, especially if you have a lot of glue in there, the glue is going to try to push them apart, and then you're going to have either a leak or they're just not going to be where they should be. So when you put the glue in there and you put these pipes together, hold it together for about 30 seconds, and then you'll be good to go. Now once you do that, you just want to check for level. Now you want this thing dead on level both ways. Now if you're off about an 1/8 inch or so, it'd be alright. But ideally, you want to get this thing dead level. So what's going to happen is if that flange is cocked way up on one side or the other, that can really mess up your per foot pitch. So whatever you set your perimeter to is, if you come into the high part of the flange, the pitch per foot could be less or could be more. So it's important that it's level as possible, if not dead on level. That way your pitch is consistent around the whole flange there, and you won't ever have a problem with the water drain. Alright, so this is another method that I use that I learned from my good buddy Metin, aka Yoda. You might know who he is if you follow me on Instagram, and if you don't, just go on Instagram and type in my company, which is D Tile&Remodeling. You'll find Yoda under my stories there. So what I'm doing here is I actually ripped down some Latticrete Hydroband board. Now, one tip that I'll give you if you're going to use this method is you don't want this board like less than about 1.25 inches, because what happens is it actually flex a lot, and you don't want that. And I've made the mistake myself where I'll put it to where I need to be at the height, and then I'll put a level on it and just kind of move that where I need to get it level. What happens is these pieces still flex a little bit, and they could move up or down in the center between the screws. If you screw in one corner or the other, it can move around in the center. So what I like to do lately, really to dial this in. Now this will take some time, but when you go to mud, it's going to be real quick. You don't have to do your mud screed. So one thing, what I'll do is I'll set my height wherever the furthest part is from the drain, whatever I need per foot, of slope, and I'll put that screw in that, and I'll use a small Dietrich trowel, 3/16 trowel, then put some thin set on it and screw it into my part. And then what I'll do is I'll take a scrap piece of board, if you can see what I'm doing here, I mark that on level. I put a mark in there, right? So that's going to be my reference point for the laser. So all I'm going to do now is just take that, it's basically like a storage hole. Take that piece, touch on the top of my ledger there, and then make sure that that laser stays on the line, and adjust my pieces going around to that laser to make sure that I'm dead level. So I just fasten it to the studs, and then if I can the bottom plates, or if there's blocking in there, and obviously make sure that when you do put some screws in there, that the sections that you're putting them in, there's no electrical or plumbing that you could hit. So what I like to do is take pictures before I even close this up, knowing where I can put the screws and where I can't put the screws, and that really helps. Now I used to just use the screws to hold it on, which would be fine, but by putting thin set on the back of these and putting screws into the wall there, they're going to be rock solid. They're going to go nowhere, and then it's really no big deal. You only got a 1/2 inch coming off the wall tiles, and they cover that, and at the top of that I'm going to be putting Purdy, so it's going to be rock solid when everything is said and done, and you're going to have a nice dead level perimeter. Okay, now we're ready for a mortar bed. Now there's a few terms that people in the industry and just DIY people like to use, and some people call it dry pack, some other people just call it mud. A few different terms. I like to just call it mud. I mean, the proper term, technically speaking, would be it's a mortar bed. It's not thin set, but it's mortar, and it's a thick bed mortar bed, so you can say. So first thing I do, key it in with the flat side of the trowel. I'm going to do around the drain first. You don't need much thin set to bond to here. Just make sure you fill in the membrane real good. I like to use a Dietrich trowel, which is 3/16. Fill around the drain first, making sure we're still level. And one thing that you want to make sure is if you have to level this out a little bit, you do not want to be pushing down on it. You don't want to be lifting up too far either, because you're going to affect your perimeter height there with the slope. But you don't want to be pushing down the mud, because the mud really doesn't bond to the flange that well. So you want to pull it up an 1/8 inch here and there if you have to get it level, and make sure that that you have thin set under there so it bonds to that. And you mix up the mud a little bit on the loose side. So the way I'm doing it now works, but what I've been doing lately, which I'll show in a later video, I'll just take a little bit of sandpaper to the back of the flange to roughen it up. I'll actually thin set the back of the flange too, and I'll do this when I'm gluing it to the back of the flange. And I'll put my mud on there after it's set, and then pack my mud in there. And that's the best way. I mean, this way works no problem. Just make sure that if you can get thin set on there with the margin trowel, do that. It really helps everything bond well. If not, just make sure that your mud is nice and loose. You don't want like soup. You just want a little bit looser than you would be to pack down your mud to get you slope. That way it gets under there real well, and it bonds somewhat to that flange mechanically. Okay. Alright, this mortar base is done. Pitched a little over 1/4 inch per foot, or about maybe close to 5/16. We got penny tile in here. All the same thickness and this small, so you don't have to go crazy with a crazy pitch here. Just 1/4 inch per foot should do it. That'll be at the minimum you want to go in any scenario, but these penny tiles, all you need is a 1/4 inch per foot. That's good. We're about a 1/4 inch to 5/16, roughly around there. So we're going to let this dry overnight, and then we'll install the Curdy membrane on top of that.